Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where we have a very interesting situation developing with the cast of Straight Outta Compton. Now, Straight Outta Compton is a breakout hit, and when you have a breakout hit, the cast of said breakout hit suddenly finds himself in a race to see who can land a follow-up project first, or in what order, and how big those follow-up projects will be. And everyone assumed that O'Shea Jackson Jr. would be in first place, as he was momentarily last week. Now, the reason everyone assumed that he would be in first place again is because when polled, moviegoers said that one of the top reasons they were seeing Straight Outta Compton was to see how Ice Cube Jr., Ice Cube's son, O'Shea Jackson Jr., did on the big screen. And so it made perfect sense when the story broke last week that Will Packer, who is a co-producer on Straight Outta Compton and very prolific in the black film community, had signed them for a follow-up deal to co-star Ice Cube and his son, O'Shea Jackson Jr. And that project was going to be an action thriller, as you might recall, where the LA riots were taking place in the background. And we discussed how appropriate that was. Well, apparently, Ice Cube also feels it's inappropriate, as soon as the Hollywood Reporter broke that story, as I recall, late in the day, overnight, Ice Cube released a statement that was covered by competing industry trades, Deadline and Variety, that no such deal was in place, that report from the Hollywood Reporter was incorrect, which is incredible because the Hollywood Reporter is an incredibly reputable industry trade. Like, they don't report false stories. And they didn't even retract this one, which really leads one to wonder what's going on behind the scenes there. For instance, who gave the story to the Hollywood Reporter? Was it Will Packer? And this is incredibly embarrassing for Will Packer to have Ice Cube come out against the project so publicly and to distance himself from it so aggressively. Perhaps because, again, as we discussed, the inappropriateness of doing an action thriller where the LA riots are in the background. But anyway, so now O'Shea Jackson Jr. doesn't have a follow-up project yet. I'm sure he'll land one. But he's been beaten to the punch by the actor who plays Eazy E, Jason Mitchell, which I think is absolutely fabulous. O'Shea Jackson Jr. does a very nice job in Straight Outta Compton, but the real standout, I felt, as I said in my review, was Jason Mitchell as Eazy E. I mean, it was a very well-written character, because Eazy E wasn't involved in the producing of this movie, so I think it's the most realistically portrayed character of the bunch because no one's there trying to make sure everything looks good because they're still trying to do business today. But so Eazy E, not only was it a great role, but it was really well performed. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Jason Mitchell's performance because a lot of actors get a great role, a great script, and they still can't plus it enough on their own. Jason Mitchell was handed a great role, and he really went the distance with it. So kudos to him, and he really deserves what is a very big deal, hopefully. Now, what's the deal? Well, he's going to actually join Corey Hawkins, who played Dr. Dre in Straight Outta Compton, who I didn't particularly like. I didn't dislike him, but I felt he really brought nothing to the picture, although Dr. Dre was the most underwritten role in the group. And as you can see from all the stories that are surfacing about his unfortunate interactions with women, you can kind of suspect why the role is so underwritten. But anyway, but he surely was doing other things, right, besides making music and beating up women. But anyway, if Apple's okay with it, I guess the rest of us should be okay with it too. So Corey Hawkins was already signed on to star, or co-star, have a supporting role most likely, in Legendary's Kong Skull Island. So now Jason Mitchell will be joining him. And Jason Mitchell is going to be playing apparently an easygoing pilot. Now, someone tweeted me last night when this story broke, I hope he doesn't die first. And I really would hope that would certainly not be the case. With Gravity, the one non-white character was, of course, the first to die, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Omar Sy in Jurassic World does not die, but at the same time, he really also has nothing to do, which is maybe why he was safe, because he was never in harm's way, because he was constantly on the bench. Hopefully, Michael B. Jordan, although I think no one's going to look to Fantastic Four, unfortunately, for any trends to be changed. But John Boyega's role in Star Wars, hopefully, will go a long way towards fixing this. But it would be pretty annoying if Jason Mitchell's character was killed off first in Legendary's Kong Skull Island, and I think Legendary's hopefully a little bit smarter than that. But also, when they were discussing this, they highlighted some other projects that Jason Mitchell is working on that are going to come out first because they're already filming, and they sound excellent as well. The one I'm most excited about is Keanu with Key and Peele. That's one of their upcoming films that they're currently working on, and Jason Mitchell will be in that as well. And then some other film called Vincent and Roxy with Emile Hirsch, who, of course, as we all know, recently had to go to jail for attacking and trying to choke a Paramount executive at the Sundance Film Festival. So he made a plea bargain for 15 days rather than 5 years. And also Zoe Kravitz will co-star as well. That's not such a big project. It's certainly not as big as Keanu, but Jason Mitchell's career seems to be in very good shape. And he totally deserves it. He's incredibly talented. So I'm curious, what do you think of Jason Mitchell joining Corey Hawkins in Skull Island? What do you think of the other projects that he's working on? And also, when you think of the cast of Straight Outta Compton, who do you think deserves to be the big breakout star? O'Shea Jackson, Jason Mitchell, or do you totally disagree with me and you're like, it's all about Corey Hawkins, Grace? What are you talking about? All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now let's talk about someone whose career should be amazing, but is not, and that's Bryan Cranston. He, of course, is famous for playing Walter White on Breaking Bad, one of the most iconic characters in TV shows of all time, and he really was a huge part of that, and his performance was absolutely amazing. But yet, for some reason, the big screen just can't figure out what to do with him. I think it might partially be Bryan Cranston's fault because he absolutely refuses to build a brand. I think, he's caught a little bit in the actor trap where he's like, oh, I have so much money from Breaking Bad and so much prestige, I'm going to do things that really interest me. And it's like, that's all well and good, but don't forget the old Hollywood rule, which I personally don't like, but it's still old Hollywood rule, totally valid, and that's do one for them and do one for you, them being the audience. Now, he might say that's Godzilla, but he got killed like in the first third of Godzilla, which he's now been going around saying was a mistake, and he told them not to do it, but they don't make big changes like that once they've signed the talent, Bryan, and you just shouldn't have signed on for the movie. But anyway, and then he has Trumbo coming up, which I think looks pretty weak. It looks a lot like a TV movie, and his performance is verging on caricature. So he just signed a new deal, though, which does sound very promising and sounds like the kind of films that he should have been making right out of the gate after he left Breaking Bad. And this is a comedy called Why Him? And it's from Meet the Parents writer-director John Hamburg, and it's going to be very similar to Meet the Parents, actually. And Ben Stiller is producing. So what's the setup? Well, Bryan Cranston will play a Midwestern dad who goes to visit his daughter in college on the West Coast in California. And when he gets there, he is absolutely shocked and appalled to meet her boyfriend, a tech billionaire, a brash tech billionaire is how they're describing it, played by Mr. James Franco. That sounds fantastic. Bryan Cranston versus James Franco? I would definitely watch that. Although both of them have really had some misfire, so while I was going to say tickets sold, I think I need to see a trailer first. But John Hamburg, I think, has a pretty good track record. He's also done films like Along Came Polly, but Meet the Parents was very, very strong high-concept work, even if it did peter out there towards the end with, the third installment. I thought 2 was pretty good. I liked Meet the Parents, too. But anyway, I think that this has a lot of potential, and I'm excited that Bryan Cranston has signed on for it. Although I have to say that a college-age person would be dating an adult, someone, I don't know. Although today, a lot of people who are college-age, have big billion-dollar corporations, so who knows. But it sounds like a really good project, and I think that it will really work if they can come up with good reasons for both sides, that neither one seems irrational. They just seem mismatched. So I think that sounds fantastic, and hopefully Bryan Cranston hasn't done too much damage to his career at this point that this is a non-starter. So I'm curious, are you still a Bryan Cranston fan? Do you still have faith in him when it comes to movies? And how about James Franco? And what do you think of them teaming up in a project like this together? All right, so the third story of the day also has to do with someone trying to shape their career, All right, so the third story of the day also has to do with someone trying to shape their career as they move forward, although this one ventures a little bit into ridiculous territory, and it's about our old pal, Vin Diesel. Now, Vin Diesel is one of the most active members in Hollywood on social media, and he has an incredible following. He has amassed really something to be in awe of, and it really has propelled the Fast and Furious movies, which he's incredibly involved in. Not only because he personally cares about them, but they're really the only part of his career that has stuck. He has some other cult hit franchises, which we're going to discuss today, but overall, the only real meat on his resume, I mean, it's not only the spine, but it's the only real meat on it is the Fast and Furious films. But again, that's not kept Vin Diesel from dreaming of having other successful franchises. And I don't blame him. You want to diversify your portfolio, and so far he's had a heck of a hard time diversifying it. I don't even think that he truly has. But anyway, for a while he was pushing the Riddick films, and he had really mixed results there. And I think the last entry, was a particular disappointment. So now he's switching his attention to another potential franchise. It is a franchise, but for him, he only did one of the movies, and that's Triple X. Now, Triple X, as you might recall, was something that was born out of the Fast and Furious' success, where both Vin Diesel and the director of Fast and Furious, the first one, Rob Cohen, decided to try and make their own urban James Bond, and they left the Fast and Furious franchise actually. But State of the Union was the sequel. I'm sorry, but Triple X did okay. It did about $277 worldwide off of a $70 million budget, so that's not bad. But it wasn't the big breakout hit of the Fast and the Furious, and obviously wasn't, as you might recall, wasn't well received both with critics and audiences. So it set Vin Diesel's career back, but he just went back to the Fast and Furious movies, fortunately. But Rob Cohen, not being the face of the film, and Fast and Furious 2, or Too Fast, Too Furious, ran into its own problems, and that franchise realized it needed Vin Diesel as much as Vin Diesel needed the franchise. So he was allowed to come back. But Rob Cohen, they just found another good director, Justin Lin, who directed most of the installments with that franchise. So Triple X really kind of ruined Rob Cohen's career. But anyway, and I'll be curious to know if he's involved with this new one that Vin Diesel has sort of announced on social media. So you have to give Vin Diesel credit. He has an incredible following on social media, and he rewards them with, somewhat or supposedly breaking stories. But because, it's not been confirmed by anyone else, we have to take this with a grain of salt. But anyway, Vin Diesel has sent out, I believe on Instagram, an old picture of him from back in the day saying, "Boy, I sure liked Triple X. It's time to revisit that. We're going to start shooting in December in the Philippines." And so that to me says foreign financing. And so it's not very difficult for me to believe at all that Vin Diesel was able to talk a foreign investor. I mean, there are a lot of really wealthy individuals on the other side of the globe who are eager to get into the movie business to fund Triple X. And I would say to that individual, I'm so glad that you want to participate in Hollywood, but you really should try, doing some, kicking the tires of the films you're considering investing in. Because I don't have a lot of faith in the Triple X franchise. I tried to continue on without Vin Diesel with Ice Cube, but that was a total failure. Although Ice Cube is a nice callback to our first story. But Ice Cube's film made $77 million worldwide, which was the budget, again, for the first Triple X. So I'm curious, what do you think of another Triple X film? Do you have any interest in it? And what do you think of Vin Diesel? Why do you think he can't get a career going beyond the Fast and Furious movies? I think the one he's perhaps best known for is The Pacifier, where he was a babysitter. But that's about it. And so I'm curious, what do you think it is about Vin Diesel that he just doesn't work in any other properties? I mean, he has The Last Witch Hunter coming out, but I don't predict a big success there for him either. Or maybe overseas. All right, so anyway, those are the three stories of the day. And the viewer question comes from Elvis Jarek. This was actually from a couple of days ago. So if your question isn't answered the next day on Morning Movie News after you ask it, that doesn't mean I haven't, taken it aside and put it in the queue for a future episode. So Elvis says, question. Hi, Grace. Hello, Elvis. Do you think the Academy will add any new categories anytime soon, like Best Motion Capture Performance? Love your show. Triple smiley face. Well, Elvis, that's a really interesting question, and a lot of people have been saying, well, why don't you have different categories, right? And I think one area in particular, well, for instance, I think motion capture has some real credibility, and also best stunt performance has also gotten a lot of traction recently. But then you always hear people saying, well, why don't we have a best blockbuster category, because they can't effectively compete in the main categories. And I think that that's your real problem, right? it's kind of disrespectful to these movies. They'd have to be handicapped with their own section. I think a lot of people, myself included, don't like the animation, best animated feature category, for instance. I think that nobody does the work they're supposed to when researching what film should win. I think that's totally a fame-based category, with people usually saying, is there a Pixar entry in here? Yes? I'd vote for that. Or, most recently, they're really into Disney animation after Frozen. But, it's almost like they ask their kids or what's the most popular rather than actually sitting down and watching the screeners themselves, which is really unfortunate. And I think that's hurt animation to some degree. And seen a lot of movies that I think deserve more recognition not getting it, because once you have your own category, there's no reason to consider you for the main categories, right? I mean, we still see a couple of films make it in to the best picture race overall that are animated, but they're far and few between. And I think considering the quality of animation these days, and there's 10 potential slots in the Best Picture category, although they're potentially changing that. But still, I think that if there wasn't the animation solo category, they'd have more of them maybe would make it into the top 10. But anyway, so I wouldn't want to see blockbusters separated out like that as well. And also motion capture. Motion capture performances, I think, are good enough now that they can stand shoulder to shoulder with the live action performances. Andy Serkis's work in Planet of the Apes, both films, is exemplary, particularly the first one. And he deserved to be nominated with his live action peers. And I think separating it out into another category, it's just going to be basically just call it the Andy Serkis category, right? And I think that it's just not fair. So, and The Dark Knight, for instance, was able to compete at the right level. So I also think that you're going to not, push people to work as hard as they can to push the edge of the envelope to get those nominations, because they're like, oh, they have to fill the blockbuster category, so I don't have to work quite as hard because I'm never going to get into the movie category, but the main Best Picture. So I think it lowers the bar and for standards and work ethic as well, as well as just makes those properties not look as good. But the one area I would like to see added is stunt work. I would like to see stunt work get a little bit more recognition. And I think maybe they should break up the visual effects category as well. I think that these are such a big part of movie making today that they deserve more recognition, and a bigger part of the presentation. I think they really kind of like shuffle those kind of awards, under the rug, like in the middle of the ceremony. They don't pay too much attention to them. I would like to see them get their due at the same level that the director and picture and actors do. So anyway, in the long answer short, to summarize, I would like to see the stunt category created, maybe some new visual effects categories, but I would like to see other films go toe-to-toe, and I'd actually like to do away with the animation solo category. So I'm curious to what you think. What would be your recommendations for shaping up the Oscar categories? I look forward to hearing them down below. And also be sure to write what you think of today's top 3 stories. So that's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let me know anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.